Hi, my name is Nate, and this is the Parent Guide Podcast, where we talk about a variety of topics on parenting with all different kinds of parents. This is our second installment of the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about teenagers. Our guest today, Sherry, is a mom of two. We'll dive into the misconceptions, struggles, and everyday life of parenting teens. Sherry, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nate.
It's great to have you here. So, you have two kids. Tell me a little bit about your two kids that you have.
I have two amazing boys. My oldest is going to be 21 on Monday. My youngest is a senior in high school. He's 17. So he's starting to show signs of humanity again, which is pretty cool.
Those are two interesting times of life.
They're
you
crazy.
have getting into 21,
Yeah.
which I very recently was that age. Not very long ago. Not to surprise any of the listeners, I'm actually young. I won't reveal my real age, but yeah, 17 going on 18 and 20 going on 21. Those are two very interesting times in life.
Absolutely.
Like, are you worried or are you happy
No.
all at the same time about turning 21? Your oldest turning 21?
Am I worried? I'm always worried. That's part of being a mom, especially when you have a mom of two boys or one boy or any kids, really. Yeah, I worry about them. But at the same time, I think because of my parenting style, there's not much more damage that could actually get done to them. No, seriously though, my advice to them on the way out the door almost daily is, you know how to make good choices, and they do.
You've done that. You've done that part. They know.
I've laid it out.
What is a good choice? Okay.
I've offered what I can. I mean, there comes a time when you have to look at them and say, you know how to do this. It's up to you to do it.
No, it's true.
So the 17-year-old, not so much, but
well, they're both on the brink of we associate turning 18 with like becoming an adult, but like it's really any time between the age of like 17 and 23 or 22 where like
really, because my husband's like 51 and I'm still questioning whether he's made
you
it.
get a point in your life where you have to where you choose to become an adult, right? You know, I mean, like
I think that's what it is. I think it has to be a choice.
Mom and dad have done everything, or mom or dad or whatever your situation is. I've been taught everything that needs to be taught. Now it's time for me to go out and take my steps, and I think that you can make that. It's not that there's any wrong time to do it, because it's like I think you just have to make sure that you're prepared for it too. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess there's some logic in the whole, at some point you have to put them out of the nest and let them try and fly on their own. I've always been of the opinion that I want my nest to be a welcoming place.
Sure.
A place where you can be open and vulnerable. And so I expect that they're gonna hit the ground. I think having that expectation, but being able to honestly talk about the implications and, the consequences of bad behavior, as opposed to, if you go do this, it's going to be bad. No, it's a whole lot easier to have that conversation when you're sitting there and they're handing you the speeding ticket, or they're talking to you about the breakup, or you're picking them up from a party that, thankfully they chose not to get in a car and drive.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot, at least I feel like, it's a whole lot easier to equip them in the moments when they're going to learn the lesson.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole part of like being a teen is you can't imagine what it could be like.
Right.
But parents know what it could be like.
You're going to make bad decisions.
Yeah.
We all make bad decisions day in, day out.
Yeah.
What I try to teach my kids is, first of all, don't try and victimize your situation and put the blame off on somebody else, because you then lose the opportunity to correct a situation or learn from a situation. So I have lived my life saying, look, I accept it. There are days I'm a train wreck.
Yeah.
But I am going to do my best to make sure that you're still getting what you need from me, and wherever I screw up, I'm going to correct along the way. That's going to go a lot further along in helping a young adult equip themselves with the coping mechanisms that they're going to need in their everyday life, then, you know, it,
No, yeah. And we actually touched on this a little bit, and like it's interesting, no matter what age group, it always ties back to this like principle, and that's like we talked about with Kim and her 2 young ones, is that like, you know, we tied it back at the end of the podcast. We were just like, in the end, you're human. You're going to make mistakes. And even to your young kids, you still have to like apologize, you know, and be like, hey, I'm human too. I'm sorry, I messed up. Now, obviously, you do have to put towards, you know, a front more of solidity with, you know, parenting, you know, together you have to make decisions and be one together. But at the same time, you also, every once in a while, when it's appropriate, you do need to apologize, because then it's going to translate down the line, whether they're young, whether they're teenage, or whether they're an adult. They're going to be like, okay, I made mistakes too. It's okay, but we just have to ask for forgiveness and just, you know, learn from it. And, you know,
like I said, I have no problem announcing that I'm a train wreck, and people basically around me know it. Probably not that bad, but
no, you're not. I can relate, because my brain is similar to yours, actually. I really, the more I hear you talk and the more I see you, the way that you post on social media, I'm like, the way that our personalities are a little bit, I should say this, our hobbies and our interests are different, but the way that our brain functions is very similar.
Okay.
You said that you have issues with like trying to focus on one hobby and like passion at the same time, like trying to like, you like, oh, I want to get really into this, and then you're like, oh, I also want to do this. Oh, I also want to do. I have that same conundrum in my life. I'm like, I'm like, oh, I'm spending time on this, and then I'm like, oh, but I also have time to spend on this. You know, it's like,
oh yeah,
I have that.
Well, all right. So here's the one thing that might redeem me, and that is that, anytime I get hyper focused on something, the one thing that will bring me back is the realization that, wait a second, I need to focus on my family. I need to focus on my kids, because there's still an unfinished project of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, that, and, you know, little buggers won't help me clean up any of my crafting stuff. So, you know, no, they are pure frustration and pure joy, because I watch them turning into like these people. They're not children anymore.
That was a topic that I actually wanted to touch on, is that, like, you know, I know that you and my wife is the same way. She loves like the young, like she loves infants, she loves babies.
Oh, yeah, they're easy.
Like, you know, they coo and they coddle, and if they're crying, you know, there's probably like 2 or 3 solutions to why they are crying, and you can probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, fix that issue pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward however many years, all of a sudden, you have 2 near adults, or one's an adult, one is like almost an adult, who are like complex thoughts, you know, that you're conversing with them. It's not like, and it's not even like, you know, simple words, like they are like full on having conversations. Was there a moment when you're like, holy crap, oh my God, like they're no longer little babies, like it's just like you're humans.
It's not one particular moment, Nate. It's literally thousands of tiny ones. You know, that when they first start putting together sentences, and they can ask for what they want, and they can, you know, throw a really rockin' tantrum in Walmart. That's when you're like, wow, this is no joke. This is 18 plus years. I'm going to have to figure this out. My children have been able to pretty much think circles around me since they could string words together. So I always knew I was going to lose that battle.
I mean, they are your children. So
okay, I'll take responsibility for that. That's
the apple
fine.
doesn't fall far from the tree. Okay?
But, you know, they're going to learn their lessons as they go.
Sure.
Somewhere along the way, I decided, and actually I can tell you exactly when it happened. My eldest had some rage issues. and it happens a lot with boys around puberty because the brain mistakes testosterone for adrenaline and cortisol, and all kind of triggers the same stuff. Yeah. And it took me a while to really wrap my head around that. But, you know, the rebellion and the talking back and the raging and all of the things that happen in that transition period. If you think about it from the term, you know, from the perspective of this is how they know to communicate. I mean, it's no different really than that when they were little. You know, they would communicate that they were tired by having a meltdown. They would communicate that they were hungry by, you know, chasing you into the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a more complex thing. Two things that have helped me to get my boys to communicate better with me is being honest with them. You know, they've asked me some pretty direct questions over the years, be it about, you know, relationships, be it about sex, be it about drugs, be it about, you know, just about anything.
Yeah.
I don't try to lay myself out as some master, you know, of any of this. If anything, I do have some experience I could share.
No, yeah.
You know, so it's better
and if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know, you know. But, you know, the honesty will lead to them having more information, whether it's, you know.
Exactly.
And then trust in turn.
And once I was able to wrap my head around these, you know, these lashing out episodes were not anything directed at me. It was more of an internal explosion that they were dealing with. Then it was a little easier to relate because then we could actually have some real conversations.
Right.
So the other trick, by the way, in case you're trying to figure this out on your own, take a hint from me. Never try to talk directly to a boy who's in the middle of a hormonal episode. Get him in the car, get on the highway, get to about 65, 70 miles an hour, and then ask them questions. Because A, they're going to be looking at stuff around them, kind of distracted, and B, they can't get out. That's awesome.
That's a really good tip. Also, it takes time to decompress. Like, you can't just, like, and that translates to life. Like,
step away.
You know, the worst possible thing to tell someone who is not calm is to calm down. You know, it's kind of like that principle.
Yeah.
And if we're going to translate, I don't know a ton about parenting, but I do know a little bit about marriage and relationships and friendships. And I know that a lot of people will say I've heard the catchphrase and the piece of advice, never go to bed upset with your partner. And I partially disagree with that, actually.
Good.
The reason I do is because sometimes when you're in the heat of a debate or a disagreement, you will say things that you don't mean, or say things that, you know, will just make everything worse. So just go to bed. And then in the morning, you're going to be like, you know what, we had this disagreement, or I was wrong, or, you know what, you were right, or we said things, you know, in my experience, you know, take a step back, breathe, Absolutely. Decompress. And I think that, like you just said.
But yeah, if you could take them out of the situation and get some perspective, not only are you going to help solve that immediate situation, but you're also going to help teach them coping skills for life. So, you know, my boys, one has major depression and the other has anxiety issues. So I tell them that I divided up my gifts equally. So, you know, but there's a lot to be said for the perspective of, you know, the perspective of a teen. Everything is the end of the world because you don't know what tomorrow can bring. You haven't had enough tomorrows to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it's more about teaching perspective and just sometimes just hanging on for dear life that you could get through to tomorrow and show them, you know. And sometimes tomorrow takes a little longer than, you know, my thing has always been hang in with me. We'll get through this one together. Could get ugly. Probably gonna have some residual splatter. So, but we're going to get through it together. And I have to say it was pretty weird. Last weekend we were just sitting and having a conversation. My 21-year-old, 20, God, he's going to be 21. My oldest, my number one son and I were having a conversation, and he's bigger than me, taller, broader, all of that. But he still needed a mom snuggle. And so he crawled up in my lap on the couch and gave me a big hug. And I was like, you know what? I may still have to bail this child out of jail at some point. But he's got real love. He's got real compassion. He's honest, and he is not afraid to ask for help when he needs it. And so,
well, that's what you want in a kid. You
there's
just
hope.
Mistakes or not, you want them to be a good human at heart. You know, you want them to be like, I did my job at raising them to be good people.
That, and I want them to become millionaires because, they have
well,
spent,
don't we all?
They have spent all of my money, and we're going to have to retire to their basement.
What was there a part when you talked about like you split your two best traits? Do you think there was you as your role, like being the parent that you think that you needed when you were younger? Are there moments where you're like, my parents failed in this area, I'm gonna be better at it with this area with my kids, Not
that they failed. I think that growing up when I did in the 80s, and it was just starting to become apparent that there were some differently wired people. Every year we had the exact same dynamic. I would start school, and about 5 weeks in, my mom would get a call, and she would need to come in because they needed to talk about my attitude or my attention span or well, it turns out when I was 36, I was finally diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
Shocker. Up until then, I was lazy. I was an underperformer.
Under-medicated.
Well, that's a given. I'm currently under-medicated. No, but like they never understood how I could go to bed and sleep for days. And then I also never understood how I could just sort of shut down. Well, turns out that those episodes were the depression and the anxiety. So they knew that there were people in our family that had similar traits and had some issues, but there was never a label for it. There was never a treatment for it. There was never an approach for it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the perspective I was able to bring to it was I've lived through this. There's now words around it, and there are treatments for it. So I think it was a whole lot easier to get them the help that they needed. And at some point as a parent, you have to give up your ego and say, I can't do this for you, but I can find somebody who can help you with this, and that's kind of where we're at.
That's really important. Wow, that's really powerful. And that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and it doesn't always have to be the avenues that you think, because for years, my oldest, Zach, went to guitar lessons. And after about 6 months, I realized that they were only probably practicing guitar in that half an hour lesson for about 10 minutes. And the other 20, they were talking about real life stuff.
Yeah.
So I actually started writing on the memo line of my checks, like therapy, guitar therapy. And it was a great experience for him. My youngest, kind of a similar situation. I wasn't able to give him the anxiety, the coping skills, the ability to, express all of that other than a safe space. But we got him involved in some sports, and we got him involved in some other activities with some folks that were able to help give him the skills that I never adapted.
Sure, yeah.
So that's going to give him a little bit of an edge on life. Plus, let's be honest, there's Ritalin, and it's good.
And it's that, like you said, putting your ego aside. There's a moment that probably every parent has to come to realize, or they never realize until afterwards, is that even though you are the parents are the two most influential figures, there's still that only is like half or 75% of who this person's going to be. They're going to be their own unique person that will have
Right.
some different qualities from you, and they will have, and you can't influence them 100%, but that's really good that you learned that lesson, and also were able to apply your past life. I feel like that's really important in parenting.
You're never going to break this cycle until you change the way you act from the way you were raised. And it's not that our parents did anything wrong. They did the best they can.
Yeah.
But now I have a little bit more knowledge because there's a little bit more expertise out there, and I'm able to offer a little bit more. So, plus I'm also hoping that my, my tactic of, if I'm way out there and there's like nothing that's not sacred to me, or there's nothing that's sacred to me, and I'm willing to just be that way out there person, hopefully they're going to rebel by being, much more together individuals is what I'm hoping for. So.
Well, we've chatted for quite a bit.
We have.
And I think we got a lot of great stuff. It was very scattered, partially on me because my brain is very scattered and my notes weren't great today.
I have
but
that
you know
effect
what?
on people.
I hope that anyone who is listening to this got some. I think we had some great tidbits in there.
Absolutely.
Sherry, one thing that the best compliment I can give is that you are unapologetically you, and you are Sherry, and I love you, Sherry. So thanks for being on the podcast. You shared a lot of
Thanks
great
for
wisdom,
inviting me.
and I hope that whenever I have teenagers, I can dispel that wisdom and experience it. You've just
I'll be
today.
I'll be more than happy to help you out along the way. So,
well, it'll be years from now, and we probably will not be working together anymore. And you're just gonna get a random phone call somehow, some way. I'm gonna get your number, and you're gonna be like, "Who the heck is calling me right now?" And I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, Sherry, remember that podcast we did like 20 years ago or whatever?" Yeah, I need that wisdom. What was that wisdom? I can't remember the last word.
I'll be happy to oblige, or just some random sarcastic comment, laugh, and hang up, whatever.
And that'll be even better. And I'll be like, classic Sherry.
There it is.
Thank you for listening to the second installment of the Parent Guide podcast. For more tips and articles on all things parenting, check out parent.guide. That's our website, parent.guide. Thanks for listening.